Right now, we're in a period of great economic uncertainty. But when we start thinking about how to get fixes to get the economy started again, we have to be a little more careful than we've been in the past. Everything we know in economics says the return on investment in people, especially very young people, very, very high. A trend has been in place for the last 30 years. It's been a fairly constant trend, which is rising inequality. So you're getting two Americas. We're talking now about in Chicago, in New York, in Toledo, in every city in America, groups of people who are living different worlds. They may drive the same roads, but they're living in different worlds, and those worlds are getting farther and farther apart. More and more Americans are now realizing they're not going to have the middle class dream. We don't offer a real chance at everything. If we deny opportunity, if we don't become more educated, we are going to fall behind. What you're going to find is a growing gap and a productivity gap. We're not going to be competitive. The technology of the 21st century is one that requires high skills, requires math, requires computer knowledge, it requires communication skills. Early investment is giving people the early background that we know supports success among those who do succeed in the larger society. So the war on poverty started in the Johnson administration in the early or mid-60s and was continued on into the 70s. And there was a hope, really a promise, a thought that we could reduce poverty in America. I was actually involved in a large-scale social experiment at one of these Lyndon Johnson-style job training programs. And what I learned from that study, and what many others have learned, is that these programs, which took disadvantaged teenagers or young adults off the street, put them into a training program, had a miserable success record. So when you started doing these cost-benefit analyses, you're asking, does this program pay for itself in terms of benefits? It turned out the job training programs had a negative return. And that was a huge, huge disappointment to many, many people. It leads to two other lines of thinking, though, and this is what's interesting. The first is you say, okay, are there any programs that do have high rates of return? Well, what we found was that early investments, something like a Perry preschool program, that substantially supplemented the lives of disadvantaged young children, very young children, were actually given enriched environments. So for 2 years, they apply these principles. They drop these kids back into the schools they come in, disadvantaged schools, and then they're followed for 40 years, now 50. And what happens is the kids who are in the program are much less likely to commit crime. They're much less likely to drop out of school. They're much more likely to have high wages and on and on and on. It didn't raise IQ, which staggered most people. What did it raise? It turned out that it raised something else. It actually promoted social skills, it promoted motivation. These are the non-cognitive skills, sometimes called soft skills, that have to do with sociability, the ability to communicate, to get along with others, the ability to have self-control. You've probably heard about the famous test of Walter Mischel, the marshmallow test. He gave these little kids marshmallows and said, here's a marshmallow, you can have it. Now, if you're willing to wait, say 20 minutes, you will get a second marshmallow, but you have to wait to eat the first marshmallow to get the second marshmallow. So some of the kids couldn't wait, they ate the marshmallow, others waited. 20 years later, Mischel follows them up. The ones who waited for the marshmallow, what happened to them? Higher test scores, they graduate high school, they go on to college, they're successful in a number of dimensions. Now we've understood that these soft skills have hard effects. We can honestly put them on the same par with IQ and cognition and some of the traditional measures we've looked at. That there is strong biological evidence, strong neuroscientific evidence that suggests that early childhood conditions determine, to a degree that we didn't realize before, the later success of a person. It's like kind of the analogy being like a tree. So if you plant the seed and you water the young seedling, what you'll get is a very firm base, and the tree will grow and actually can resist a lot of strain. So the idea that skill begets skill is in early years, you create the skills that make it easier to acquire skills in the future years. But if we give the base early on, it becomes much easier to invest, to teach, and to motivate later on. On the other hand, if the kid develops really poor attitudes, the kid really is weak in terms of cognition, the children are not really very highly motivated in any way, it becomes extremely difficult at age 17, 18, and 19 to get them interested in the workplace. And again, we're right back to building character, building skills, building self-control, building the capability to wait for the second marshmallow. These soft skills can predict things like crime. What does it cost American society for crime in a given year? One estimate was about $1 trillion. What do we know is a good predictor of crime? Not only cognitive skills, but social-emotional abilities, self-control, the ability to regulate, and so forth. Health is a major problem in the American society. A lot of the behaviors that give rise to major health problems start early in life. Something missing from all the discussion is prevention, which is a matter of self-control and motivation. So increasingly, many doctors, psychologists, and now economists are getting into the business of saying, can we change the motivations of people? So for example, suppose that somebody was diagnosed with diabetes, heart disease, even people on cancer treatments. They're told to avoid certain kinds of stress, not to do this, not to do that, but they won't do it. The same thing was true with smoking and a lot of other behaviors. It's not like people don't know. It's not that. It's they can't act on it. So if you're interested in improving the workforce of next century or the rest of this century, what you will do is actually build skills, build the motivations, build the incentives that make people able to participate in the larger society. Right now, a lot of economists don't have a clue of what's going on. I mean, a lot of economists, and probably me included. But when we start thinking about how to get fixes to get the economy started again, we have to be a little more careful than we've been in the past. We have a big emphasis now on potholes, infrastructure it's called. The new director of OMB, Peter Orszag, has actually written a definitive study of what the economic rate of return is to potholes. And he found that they're pretty low, actually. What I learned and became so important was that investing in people was as important as buildings or structures or roads, although those are important too. There are many projects out there, but few have the rate of return of early childhood investments, offering 10% annual rate of return. So for the same dollars, you can actually invest by training teachers and training children. But what comes out of it is a reduction in crime, the promotion of schooling, the fact that we're going to get a more skilled workforce in the future. This is not just speculation. This is not, I represent no lobby group. It's a piece of analytical work. And so in that sense, this should be a favored project by anybody, whether or not the Republican or Democratic or any other party line. You could essentially both simultaneously reduce inequality and increase productivity in the society by investing in early childhood programs.